Chapter 4. For Rain, the Watch, the Ambush. They came across the caravan quickly enough. The Black Company had ridden nonstop to make it to the pass in time. They were in luck as a heavy snowfall had slowed the Alaran caravan and had given them time to set up camp and rest. The camp was set up just behind Theron, down a small hill hidden from the road. Theron knew his troops were cold and tired, he could feel it. But they were too good at what they did to voice it. They were 56 strong, some of the best of Rain. Yet he could see the bitterness and longing for home in their faces nonetheless. Theron couldn't help but feel proud of his troops and their determination. It filled him with joy to see them so eager to face their enemies. He had seen fear in the faces of his own troops before he ever joined the Black Company, long before he was a soldier of standing in Rain. Theron ran a hand through his graying beard absent-mindedly, as he did every time before a battle. "Still no sign of more mages?" he asked his second-in-command. She stood beside him shivering, uncomplaining. Her hair was short, and there was a scar on her scalp from when he had stitched her head back up many seasons back now. She shook her head. "Just the one on horseback," she added. "Though he seems formidable." "He's no match for all of us," he replied. She nodded again. "Yes, sir." There was a long pause. He turned to look at her, studying her face. "You're oddly quiet," he said simply. She didn't reply. She only stared back with her dark eyes. He had dreamed of those eyes many nights. But as a forgiven, he was not awarded the luxury of taking a wife. Such was his sacrifice in her name. He pushed the thoughts aside. "Come on, Mira, I know you well enough to know when you wish to say something. Speak freely," he said, warming his hands with his breath. "The others," she began, "they wish to go home." She let her words hang. "As do I, Mira," he sighed. "Yes, sir." She leaned on him for a moment as she repositioned, her warmth comforting him for the briefest of moments. "We do this, and we can go home," he offered. "Until when?" "When is the next time they will send us out again?" she replied a little hastily, some bite in her tone. His eyes locked on hers and she quelled, looking down sheepishly. "Sir." Theron sighed deeply. "I know," he added. "I miss my home too." He was silent for a moment. Then he gave her a side glance, locking eyes with her with a small smile. "Tell me about your home, Mira." "I live outside the city walls," she began. "In Farmside?" "No, near Warren," she corrected. "Ah," he added, nodding. His breath created a thick fog in the air as he shivered. "I live alone with my horses." She stared at the sky. "Aaron, my horse master, is probably putting them in right now before the long dark." She smiled weakly. "I have a large stone hearth that I miss more than anything right now." She laughed, looking up, remembering. Theron laughed with her. "I'm sure we could all use a good warm fire right now." "I have a large dining table that has probably been used once," she continued. "You should come by sometime," she said, quieter. "I'm not much of a cook, but I would love to." He bumped her with his shoulder. He could feel the tension growing between them. He turned his gaze on the road. The scouts hadn't returned yet, and it was starting to make him nervous. "I have a cellar that is warm and dry year-round. I keep only the best there," she continued. "I even have a few bottles from some imperial vineyards." "Blasphemy," he added mockingly. He knew that most troops dreamed of tasting the wines of Alara. She laughed her warm, melodious laugh. It was music to him in a world of noise. "We could share a bottle," she said, quieter still. "And we could drink all night." She shifted her weight, stepping just the slightest bit closer. "And eat." He felt her shoulder brush his again. He wanted so badly to put his arm around her. "And we could rise whenever we wanted," she said, leaning in, both of them looking straight ahead. "Now you're speaking fairy tales," he replied as another fog cloud appeared before them. You don't see yourself retiring ever?" "I will retire at the end of a blade, I think." Perhaps in a few hours, if I'm being honest. He looked at her for another moment. Her warm eyes stared back, haunted, wanting to say more. I see you old and gray by a fire, reading a book. She studied him. That sounds lovely. We could have that, Theron, she said softly. Mira. He sighed, unsure of how to reply. Then there was the unmistakable sound of 2 horses coming up the hill. He saw their figures break through the trees as the last bit of light left the forest. The sky was still light, though not for long. Soon they would be in more than 100 hours of darkness. Mira sighed. They looked at each other for a moment before finally Theron put a hand on her shoulder and nodded. Get ready, he said quietly. Yes, sir. She smiled, the light in her eyes dimmed once more. What news? He called to the riders as they stepped in front of them. The caravan is close. Maybe half an hour away, the rider spoke out of breath. Good. To the camp, get warm and rouse the troops, he sighed deeply. It's time. The Black Company poured down the hill like water in a river. Theron was the first to cry out as a ball of fire erupted along the line from their hands. He felt the tingling on his skin as the mages in his company fired on the Alaran lines. His troops roared and crashed on silver shields. The battlefield was now ablaze as arrows flew past. He watched as soldiers on both sides fell quickly, the clang of swords and the cry of battle filling his ears. He turned in time to see a sword coming at him and parried it sloppily. He recovered quickly, stumbling backwards, and with a few swings cut down his opponent, their blood spraying him. Another gout of flame erupted along the line as another mage torched a wagon in the caravan. Theron heard the cries of the nobles inside, their screams drowned out by the battle, but the smell of their flesh permeated along the front. For rain! He heard his troops call out. For the Great Mother! Another replied. The Alarans were caught completely unawares. Within minutes, the line began to fold, and their silver armor littered the floor. Even though Theron's troops were outnumbered, the element of surprise proved too much. Theron walked over bodies, moving towards the back of the caravan. He saw bodies melted into the earth, their cloaks still on fire. One was blinking still, too far gone to feel the pain, but croaked in agony as he reached up for Theron. Theron drove his blade into his head, putting him out of his misery. In front of him, he watched one of his forgiven troops, on horseback, come to swords with a handsome knight on a horse of his own. The Alaran clearly knew what he was doing, and dispatched not one but 3 of Theron's troops, one after the other, before Theron caught up. You fight well, but you will die tonight, Imperial, Theron spoke loudly across the field. The man dismounted with a smile. He seemed to relish the challenge. For a brief moment, the Alaran knight turned away, his crimson cloak towards Theron. If it had been any other soldier, the Alaran might have had him. But Theron watched as the soldier whipped around quickly and a blast of lightning arced its way towards him. He felt the sting of its heat for a mere moment, the strange smell in the air before his own hands went up and the lightning broke on his barrier, arcing away and into the trees. Nice try, Theron called out again, his heart racing. That was close. What is your name? The knight called to Theron. Why? Theron replied, the 2 pacing in front of each other as the battle erupted behind them, circling around each other like predators. I wish to know what to put on your gravestone when I kill you, the knight replied. Theron laughed and spat on the ground. And believe me, I will kill you, he retorted. It will be my blade that shuts your eyes forever. Theron is my name, soldier of Alara, though you do not need to know it. The Alaran knight smirked at him as the sky grew darker. And what is your name? You can't use my joke, he retorted. I wish to know whose parents I'll be riding home to tonight to explain how their son died bravely for jesting too much, Theron spat out. My name is Killian Thrum, first knight of the Red Suns, and you chose the wrong battle tonight, Theron, child of rain. Killian leapt forward with a violent scream. Their swords crashed together violently. The 2 parried, spinning around each other. Theron slung fire at Killian Thrum, and Killian skillfully absorbed it, the flames breaking against him, nothing more than light in the growing darkness. Within those few tense exchanges, the battle continued around them as the Alaran caravan was slowly overcome. Then it was over. Killian stumbled, trying to catch himself a moment too late, and with one swift kick, Theron threw him off the road and into the canyon abyss. He watched at the edge of the battle as Killian tumbled into the darkness of the trees far below.